He is the bread of life, the way, the truth, and the life. He is the true vine, the light of the world, the good shepherd, and the door. He is the resurrection and the life. He is I am.
Well, good morning, NorthPoint. Hope you're doing good this morning on this beautiful, sunny, warm weather weekend. Here's the deal. We're in the school age kids kind of thing deal, stage of life. And so that means for spring break, we try to get out of town with our kids. So we went down to Gulf Shores, Alabama this last week with half the rest of the United States, going there, or Florida, I think. And it was great, but what we decided to do is we decided to grab the son and bring it back up here to you in Iowa. And so we brought it was a long trip, it took a long time, but hopefully you're enjoying the sun and the great weather this weekend. Hey, we're gonna continue our series in the Gospel of John, this I Am series in John chapter 5. So if you've got a Bible, take it and turn to John chapter 5 this morning if you would. And while you're turning there, let me just ask you, can we admit something this morning, that there are some people that we like more than others, right? I have 5 children, and no, I'm just kidding, I'm not gonna say that. Not true, girls. But there are just some people that we like, we connect with, we get along with, that we jive with more than other people. And then when we extend this to people's beliefs and values and maybe even their political persuasions, you realize there's some people that you're really down with and other people that just plain, they make you angry. Sometimes there might even be somebody that you want to punch, like you just get so frustrated and angry with them, with where they're at, with what they're teaching, what they're saying, what they believe, what they stand for, that you're just so angry about that thing. Like I've told you before that I love you and I love this community and I love our church and I really, really mean that. I've given my life to this. Like I'm a pastor, giving my life to people. Like it's just so amazing. But if we were ever on the interstate together and you are driving in that left lane and you ain't passing nobody, I'm kind of gonna wanna ram you. Not kind of, I am. And here's the thing, we just went down to Gulf Shores. We went through 9 different states. We went down a different way than when we came back. 9 states we went through, and it is a cross-cultural phenomenon in the entire United States that people do this. And when you're on like a 17-hour journey, those Sunday left lane drivers that are like, oh, we're just enjoying the scenery. Enjoy the scenery later. Like get out of the left lane, right? So I'm just being honest with you. It's a sin issue, and I know that, and I'm working on it, and I'm praying about it, kind of. But that's the thing for me. So I don't know what it is for you. For you, it might just be people, that are loud talkers, and they always talk, and it's always about themselves. It could be people that laugh loudly. It could be people that don't give courtesy laughs. Are you ever with somebody in a conversation and they don't give you any courtesy laughs? They're just looking at you like you're a moron the entire time. That's happened to me before. It could be somebody that is a cat owner. It could be Democrats. It could be Republicans. Now, part of this is just being a human and dealing with people, right? It's just part of humanity and what we do. There are some people we get along with, we connect with more easily than others, or some people that anger us. But it's also something that we have to push back on in ourselves. Because you know this, right? Society is becoming increasingly tribal, angry, and outraged at people. We're becoming less empathetic, less kind, less generous. And we're kind of thinking that we have the right to call people idiots. We actually sort of think that we've got to take up this mantle and we got to tell the truth, we got to speak the truth, we got to tell it how it is, and we got to let people know that they are idiots. Come on, Jeremy, we got to be truth speakers. Now, hear me carefully. For sure, there's ideas and there's policies and there are approaches that should be evaluated and argued against. But when it comes to people, attacking people, demonizing people, hating people, something is wrong with us. Something is really wrong with us as a society. We're 5 chapters into the Gospel of John, looking at the life of Jesus. And if we take a step back and we look at the first 5 chapters as a whole, we can see something very profound about how Jesus approached people. Now let's start in chapter 1. In chapter 1, Jesus calls some of his followers to himself, some of his first followers, right? He calls fishermen, he calls blue-collar workers, and then a very morally upright guy by the name of Nathaniel. In chapter 2, Jesus goes to a wedding, a community celebration with people of the community to show them that he values community and community life. And he does his first miracle there where he turns water into wine to keep the wedding celebration going. After this, he clears the temple of these money changers and these people that were exploiting others and keeping common, ordinary people from worshiping God. Jesus is like, if you want to be passionate about the right things, here's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about people that keep other people from worshiping God. And so he cleanses the temple and he's angry about that, right? In chapter 3, he speaks with an insider, Nicodemus. This religious leader who is a pillar of society, who is wealthy, who is a morally upstanding Jew, and is in like the highest social class in his society. In chapter 4, he does almost the opposite, and he goes to Samaria, an unreached area where no good upstanding Jew would ever go to talk to a woman that no one wanted anything to do with. She was immoral, she was despised, we can call her an outsider, and he offers her life. We didn't look at this story, but further on in chapter 4, he goes to Galilee, which is like his hometown area, and he heals an official's son. The official is probably another non-Jew, a Gentile. In chapter 5, the story we're gonna look at today, he's back in Jerusalem, and he heals a disabled man who has been disabled for 38 years. Now, the reason I point all of these out just in the first 5 chapters is sometimes when we read individual stories and passages, we miss a bigger point. But when you look at these 5 stories as a whole, we see something very significant. What is John trying to tell us about Jesus's approach to people? What he's trying to show us is this, is that Jesus came for everyone, that Jesus came for all kinds of people, that Jesus is inclusive. He's for everyone. I mean, just think about the diversity of the people, the places, the social status, the economic status, the moral inclinations of the people that he came to in just the first 5 chapters of John's gospel. He's in Jerusalem, and then he's in Samaria, which is a non-Jewish territory, the mudbloods, the mixed race people, right? And then he goes up to Galilee. Now, something else that you have to know, Israel was divided between Judea in the south, where Jerusalem is, and Galilee. We saw that a couple of weeks ago. The people that lived in Jerusalem, in the southern part of Israel, they even despised their own Jewish people that were up in Galilee. In Galilee, you had an accent. You know, they were like Hicks that were up there, and they didn't like those people, and they made fun of them. In fact, one of them says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Like, could Jesus really come from Nazareth? Because nothing good comes from there. There's a lot of racism even in Judaism during this time. And Jesus goes to all of those people. He goes to Jews, he goes to a half-Jew, he goes to a Gentile. He goes to men and he goes to women, to rich and poor, to the young and the old, to the moral and to the immoral. What is John trying to tell us? He's trying to tell us that we may have different ideas, we may have different opinions, we may have different tribes, we may have different skin colors, there may be different people that we more naturally associate ourselves with, but Jesus is coming for us all. Jesus came for us all. And that includes you, and it includes your neighbor with the love is love sign. And it includes your neighbor with the Trump 2024 sign. And it includes the neighbor who lets his dog poop in your yard. True story, right? All of those people. No one is off limits. Whether you're rich, you're poor, you're smart, you're athletic, you're indoorsy, you're vegan, you're organic, you're heterosexual, you're homosexual, you're BLM, you're QAnon, he's coming for all of you. He's coming for all of us. That's the kind of God that he is. Now let's push this a little bit further and ask, what exactly is he coming to do then? Jesus comes for everybody. What is he coming to do? Like, why is he talking to and healing and interacting with all of these people? Well, if we look back at all of these stories, we'll see a common thread that John paints through every single one of these stories, and it is this, that Jesus wants you to believe in him. It's not overly profound, but it is the thread that you would find through all of these stories. Jesus wants to bring you to believe in him and give your life to him. So in chapter 1 with his first disciples, he talked to them from the very beginning about believing in him. In chapter 2, when he turns that water into wine, the story tells us, and his disciples believed in him when they saw that sign that Jesus did. In chapter 2, after he cleanses the temple, we read that many people believed in Jesus when he was in Jerusalem doing this. In chapter 3, when he talks to Nicodemus, he tells Nicodemus that everyone who believes in me can have eternal life. And after speaking to the Samaritan woman in chapter 4, we are told that many from the town believed in Jesus because of the woman's testimony. It's not too hard to pick up on what Jesus is laying down here. He came and he comes for all people in order to produce belief in them. Okay, so if that's what Jesus is trying to do, he comes for all people to produce belief in us. believe what? Like, what is it that Jesus wants us to believe? And there's many ways that we could describe this. I mean, there's a lot of ways the Bible describes it. I'm just gonna simply describe it in two ways today, and they really push against each other. The first thing that Jesus wants you to believe is this, that your way is not enough. Jesus is trying to help you to see that as a human, you may be very successful. You might be doing good in your career and family and life. You might overall be kind of happy and happy with where you're at and what you're doing. But you are also very temporary, and you won't ever be fully satisfied by your own efforts. That's what Jesus wants you to see, that you're at the end of the day, you're not enough. Let me just share with you personally. I had a birthday this last week. While we were on spring break, I turned 35. A few more years than that. I turned 43, and I know for some of you that are older than that, you're like, oh, you're a young buck, that's not that old. But it's old enough to realize that life is hard, and I can't do it on my own. Now, here's the deal. Like, if you look at my life and as objectively as I could evaluate my own life, I would be like, I have a great job. I love living here. I mean it when I say I love you and I love this place. Like, I love being in Gulf Shores, but I loved coming home because I like Des Moines. Sometimes Michelle and I talk, and we're like, if you could live anywhere, where would you live? And I'm like, I think we would live here. I think this is where we would live. And I know some of you are like, the beach, man. But beach for a while, then sand's everywhere, and I'm tired of that. So like, let's get back home, you know? And so I love it here because I love you and I love this community. God's given me amazing children and he's given me a great family. I love my wife. I like learning. I like school. So I've got to do basically all the education that I could do, right? I've done all of those things, got lots of degrees. The church has been overall successful. I'm happy about that. I'm thankful for where I'm at, for where God has placed me. There's so many things that are really, really good. But I'm also reminded that in my heart, when I'm honest with myself, I'm often disappointed. You know, I'm like, are we ever going to achieve that? Am I ever going to get there? Are we ever going to be able to do this? Am I ever going to get over this? Am I ever going to stop that? Am I ever going to do exactly what I want to do when I want to do it? Am I ever going to stop losing my temper with this thing? Am I ever going to really have the love that I need to have in my heart? In my heart, when I'm honest with myself, that's really how I often feel. And then God also reminds me that there's a whole lot of things that I'm not in control of and that I am very, very temporary. I've noticed this, I think it was around when I turned 40, is that whenever I go to sit down, I make the old man noises. You know what I'm talking about? Like every time I go to sit down, I'm like, ah. And I'm like, did I just grunt for like 10 seconds while I was sitting down? And then sometimes when I get up, I have to rock. You know, like to get out, if the chair reclines too much, we're like, okay, I'm gonna get this. Now, look, I've had back problems for 25 years, like chronic back issues. So I get a little bit of an excuse there, but I'm just reminded that you are old and you are getting older and you're not gonna last forever. And then if I can be very open with you, there's one other way that God reminds me I'm not in control, and that is that my mom is struggling with pancreatic cancer. And she's on her second round of that. I'm a pastor, so I've done a lot of funerals for people and tried to love and to care for people through that, all of that process. I've had other relatives that have passed away, but never my mom. You know, and you probably know, if you know me well enough, you've been here very long, my family will tell you I'm not a super emotional person. I mean, I feel it in my heart, but it doesn't usually come out on my face, you know, and stuff. I'm a little bit more like that. But I've cried more about my mom than anything ever in my entire life, and I'm just not in control of that. I'm temporary. We don't, you know, last forever. And so if I don't have Jesus forgiving me for my failures, loving me, affirming me, giving me hope and confidence, telling me that I'm found in him, finding my identity in him, I don't know what I do because I'm not enough. But the second truth that Jesus wants you to see, this is what he wants you to believe. You've got to start here. You've got to start with I'm not enough, because you're never going to get to the best part if you don't get to, you know, I might be pretty good, but I'm not good enough, is that Jesus is enough. That he is enough, that he gives life, that he gives assurance, that he gives confidence, that he's the one that gives us hope and sustains us. In John chapter 20, at the very end of John's book that he writes here about Jesus, he tells us something that very profound about what Jesus is trying to do and what John himself is trying to do in writing all of this stuff. And he says this: Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of disciples, which are not recorded in this book, in the Gospel of John. But what I've written to you, these things that I've given you, they're written so that you may, here's our word, so that you might believe. Everything I'm giving you from Jesus is given so that you might believe that Jesus is the Messiah, that he's the Savior of the world, and he also is the Son of God, That is, he is fully, completely God. He's the one who created you, who has come down to us, and that by believing you might have life, real life, true life, hope, confidence, joy, fulfillment in his name, through him. That's what Jesus is trying to produce in us, to believe that I'm not enough, but he is enough. To the woman at the well, Jesus called this living water because that connected with her and what she was there at that well to do. To Nicodemus, he called it being born again, being given new life. And every time he healed somebody physically, it was a visible picture of the change and the hope that Jesus brings to those who believe in him. So let me implore you, believe in God. Believe in his son, Jesus Christ, who died for you and gives you a relationship with your creator that is full of hope and life and joy, an identity that is not based on your performance and forgiveness when you fail. It's all of that and more. That's the life that Jesus offers to us by believing in him. And what I want us to do today is I want us to think about this belief in Jesus a little bit more. Jesus came for you. He came for all people. He wants to give you life. But there's some things that we need to know about the nature of this belief, about what it is like to believe and to follow Jesus. And for those of you that are like, okay, yeah, I'm in with that. Like, which I imagine, I'm guessing most of you are, that's why you're here, is because you're like, yes, I believe in Jesus and I want to follow him with my life. You know something about this belief. You know that it's a continuing, ongoing thing. It's not something that you just resolve and then you move on from, right? Continuing to believe in Jesus is a big deal and it's not easy. Believing in Jesus is not like the COVID vaccine, right? Like I get one shot or maybe I do the 2-shot vaccine and then I still gotta be careful, but I'm basically good to go because I got my vaccine, I can do what I wanna do. It doesn't work like that, right? Believing in Jesus is something that you have to wake up every single morning, every single day, and you say, Jesus, help me today to realize that I'm not enough, but you are enough. Help me to find my worth and my value and my identity in you. Give me peace when I struggle. Give me patience. Give me grace. I'm looking to you, Jesus, today. That's what belief looks like. And you know that. So what I want us to do is I want us to consider 4 things about the nature of this belief, this believing in Jesus thing. And to get at these 4 things, check out the story in John chapter 5, where Jesus heals this guy. John chapter 5 and verse 1. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now, there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Now, a number of weeks back, if you remember, Jay did a message for us on how we can trust the Bible. And part of what he talked about was the archaeological evidence that we had, that these things that happened in the first century, they really did exist, they really did happen. This is one of the stories that he used. In fact, for many, many years, scholars of the Bible were like, we don't know if the pool of Bethesda really existed. This story might be made up. We've never found it. And then a number of years ago, they found a 5-pooled colonnade just north of the temple in Jerusalem where this pool of Bethesda would be. Pretty good evidence that the scriptures are true and that they are real. This is that story. And at this place that was just north of the temple where these pools were and this 5 colonnades, it's where a lot of disabled people would hang out. They would have shelter from the elements outside and they would gather and kind of have a community together there. That's what verse 3 says. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, notice the compassion of Jesus. He asked him, do you want to get well? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Now here's what we have to know. There was some superstition surrounding this Bethesda pool. And all of these people, these disabled people would gather there. And the story goes that every once in a while, an angel would come down from heaven and apparently make the pool like a hot tub, with the bubbles, or like stir it up to make a commotion in the pool. And then whichever person could get to the pool and touch the waters of the pool first, they would be healed if they could beat everybody else out. Which sounds incredibly mean to me, right? I know you're all disabled, you can't hear, you can't see, and you can't walk, but the first one of you that is the least disabled in this moment and can outperform all of the other people here, you're gonna get healed. This was the superstition that they had. Jesus is like, we're not gonna do it that way. I've got a better way. There's a better way that we can do this. Notice how it goes, verse 8, Jesus said to the man, get up. Pick up your mat and walk. How about we do it that way? At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and he walked. Now the day on which this took place was a Sabbath day. Okay, if we were watching this as a movie scene, Right now, when you see all of this that is happening, right now in the background of the movie would go the ominous music going dun, 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 dun. That's what it means in verse 9 when the day on which this took place was a Sabbath, because the religious leaders had a big problem with this. Verse 10, so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, it is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. Really? Like this is gonna be the response. This guy, for probably most of his life, has not been able to walk. For almost 40 years, he can't walk. And you know this guy. He's at this place all of the time. All of a sudden, he is up walking around carrying his mat. And what you're concerned about is that he's breaking your rules, not God's rules. These weren't God's rules about the Sabbath. These were man-made rules that were added on to what God had said about the Sabbath. But these religious leaders are more concerned for their rules, for their policies, than they are for a person. When Jesus saw this man, he had compassion because he realized he had been in this state for a long time, John says. When the religious leaders saw this man, they just said, you're not doing it our way. You're not following our rules. You're not following what you're supposed to follow. And so they're upset at the man and condemning the man. Verse 11, but the man replied, the man who made me well said to me, pick up your mat and walk. He's like, well, I'm just doing what the guy who healed me said. And when somebody heals you, you kind of follow what they say, right? That's what I'm doing. Verse 12, so they ask him, who is this fellow who told you to pick up and walk? The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Jesus is sneaky sometimes, right? So he heals the man and then he's like, peace out, I'm leaving. But he finds him later on. Verse 14, later Jesus found the man at the temple and he said to him, this is interesting, see you are well again, stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. Jesus challenges the guy, right? He wasn't quite done with him. I mean, grace comes first. Healing comes first, compassion from Jesus comes first. But then Jesus has another word for him because Jesus is God. And he says to him, don't live that way, you're not enough. Don't go your way, listen to me. Follow me, truly believe in me, right? So how did the man respond? Verse 15, the man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who made him well. Okay. Now when I read that, I kind of read tattletale. I mean, that's what I'm thinking, right? Now maybe this man, they're the religious leaders. He has respect for them, of course. They say, who healed you? He knows who healed him, so he goes back and tell them. But it sort of feels like he's ratting Jesus out, right? Like he was all too anxious. I'm not even sure if he heard the don't sin anymore part, but he's like, okay, now I know who did. I got to go back and I got to tell the religious leaders who did this. Now, what's going on here? John told us that the signs that Jesus did are to produce belief in us. So when he heals this man, he's trying to produce belief in him. Yes, he wants to heal him physically. Yes, he wants to help him and give him that grace. But Jesus ultimately wants this man to find true life. Did the man get it? I don't know. I don't know if he did. And John doesn't tell us, which is the first thing that we see about belief in Jesus. It's this, that believing in Jesus takes time. Believing in Jesus takes time. This man was healed and maybe he believed. Maybe, but Jesus still healed him and loved him. And maybe later on, he thought back on the instance, who Jesus was, how he healed him, what he said to him, and then he fully believed. Think about Nicodemus. In chapter 3, Jesus has the conversation with the religious leader, Nicodemus. And after this conversation, we have no indication in the story that Nicodemus actually believed in Jesus. And then we don't hear a lot more about Nicodemus in John's gospel. And he's the only gospel that mentions him. In chapter 7, there's a little story about Nicodemus maybe subtly defending Jesus to the other religious leaders. But then we hear about Nicodemus one more time. After Jesus' death on the cross, guess who goes to claim Jesus' body and embalm him? A man by the name of Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. Apparently, in the end, Nicodemus did come to believe. It would have been very risky for somebody of Nicodemus' stature to go and to say, hey, can I have Jesus' body and take care of him because I follow Jesus, in essence? Now, Nicodemus probably believed somewhat quietly, maybe subtly, probably fearing his fellow Pharisees, but it seemed over time, he came to believe in Jesus. Let's talk about Jesus' disciples. Jesus' disciples wavered between faith and belief for 3.5 years. After Jesus turned that water into wine, this first miracle that he did, John tells us that his disciples believed in him. And if you could read that in one way, be like, oh, settled. His disciples believed in him. They asked Jesus in their heart. They trusted him. They're good to go, right? No. These dudes struggled big time all throughout Jesus' ministry. For 3.5 years, it took them to truly, fully believe in Jesus. After Jesus' trial, when he is arrested, guess what happened? One of his closest followers denied him. One other one betrayed him, and every single one of them left him in an act of unbelief. But then after his resurrection, They turned the world upside down through their belief and their faith in Jesus. Believing and acting on your faith in Jesus, it takes time. Believing and acting on your belief, it takes time. So look, what people need, what you need and what I need, is grace and space. Grace and space. I've heard a number of people use this expression. I don't know who originated it, so I'm trying to give them credit for it, but I really like the expression. Grace and space, partly because it rhymes and it's easy to remember, but it's good. Grace and space. People need patience and room to ask questions and to express doubts and to wrestle. They need to know that they can be honest. You need to know that you can express your doubts, and you need to have a long view of it with yourself and with other people. Look, if you ever have children, you know as a parent, you need this. You've got to have patience and a long view of parenting with a lot of patience, because some days you're pretty sure you're raising criminals. In your mind, you're like, I'm pretty sure I'm getting you ready for jail. Like, I think that's what's happening right now. Why do you never listen? Why do I have to say this so many times? I'm tired of hearing my own voice. I'm tired of repeating this. I'm getting a little bit angry about this, about Pop-Tarts or whatever, popcorn, whatever it is the most ridiculous thing, but I can't control it. And you've got to have a long view that steps back from that and says, this is a moment in time. We're gonna keep loving, we're gonna keep teaching, we're gonna keep being patient, and I'm gonna say, forgive me, I'm sorry, too, right? Because kids, like every human, needs grace and space. Not just forcing conformity to rules. If in our parenting, and as we lead other people, we're just trying to force conformity to rules, to outward expressions of obedience, you might end up with a whole bunch of Pharisees. They might not go to jail, but they're gonna be legalistic and look down on everybody else and be full of pride in their lives for following all the rules to the T. That's what the religious leaders was. Jesus sees people. He sees the hearts of people. Look, belief is often a process that takes time. There may be special moments, there may be big moments, but by and large, change and growth, it takes time, grace and space. I've said this to you before, but if you were to study the Old Testament scriptures, the first half of our Bible, and you were trying to ask yourself this question, what is the primary way that God reveals himself to us? Like when God is saying to humans, this is who I am, what's the number one thing he wants us to know about him? You know what you would find repeated most over and over again in the Old Testament scriptures? You would find this verse: the Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. Number one thing you would read over and over and over again. That God is compassionate and he is gracious and he is slow to get angry with you and he is full of love for you. We see this repeated in the New Testament. In 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 9, we read this, that the Lord is patient with you. God is patient with you. He's not wanting anyone to perish, but he wants everyone, all people, to come to repentance. He wants every single person to believe in him, and so he is patient with you because he knows it's a process. So hold on, keep going. Patience with your kids, patience with your neighbors, patience with your coworkers, your classmates, your spouse, patience with your own doubts and struggles. I think about a young girl, someone that I know that, she was raised in such a good home. Parents that loved her, provided for her, great siblings, a big family, went to church, trying to follow God, doing all things the right way. But this girl struggled with life and faith. And she just made some really bad decisions in her life. And she hurt other people, she hurt herself. She became estranged from her family. She had a limited relationship with them. The relationship was always strained because of her decisions. And if you would look at her life a number of years ago, you would be like, that's a lost cause. Like, that's just it. That's done, that's gone. That's never gonna change. She's just so entrenched in her way of living and what she wants to do, and she doesn't have much contact even with her family. So this is never going to turn around. Hard to imagine a good outcome, but belief takes time. And we have a God who is strong and very, very patient. And it may have taken 25 years or so of this young girl's life, but eventually this young woman let God have her life. And she came to believe in him and be changed. I bet you know someone like that. Could be your story. Maybe you need that word for someone in your life right now. Or maybe you need to hear that. God is patient with you. He's ready to work. He's ready to give you life. He is ready to change you. He's ready to hear your concerns, your struggles, and your doubts. He's ready to give you grace and space. In fact, that is what he's doing. Exactly. So look, if Nicodemus took time, if Jesus' followers took time, if maybe even you need time, then this leads us to our second thing. We have to be very careful about canceling people. The second thing we see about the nature of belief in Jesus is that if believing in Jesus takes time, we got to be very careful about canceling people. Don't cancel people. Can we talk cancel culture a little bit this morning? Oh man, because here's what's going to happen. We're in the age of outrage. You know that, right? And so tomorrow, you're going to look at your news feed if you look at news or watch news, and you are going to be told what you should be angry about, what you should be mad about. It's going to get you worked up. You're going to be told who you should cancel. And a part of that narrative is going to be there is no redemption. There's unpardonable sins. There are things that people cannot recover from, and you need to eliminate these people from your life and probably post about it on social media and let everybody know that you're doing the right thing. Do you know this happened to Jesus? Actually happened in this very story. Look at chapter 5 and verse 16. After the story goes on, it says, so because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Jesus said to them, my Father is always at work to this very day, and I'm working. God never stopped working. He loves people. He heals people. I'm healing people. I'm going to do it on the Sabbath day. I made the Sabbath, by the way, and I made you, so I can do that because I love people. Verse 18, for this reason, they tried all the more to kill him, to kill Jesus. Because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. The religious leaders tried to cancel Jesus, and you know what? They would be successful. They actually did cancel him, for 3 days at least, until they came to realize, wow, God just used us as the instruments of God saving the world and canceling sin and bringing about salvation. But look, here's the question I want you to think about. What if we cancel someone that God is still working on? What if we're more impatient than God? What if we're more unforgiving than the God who has fully forgiven us? Here's what we have to know, and hear me clearly on this. There are things to be angry about. There are ideas and policies and actions that are wrong. There are people that are really screwed up, and there is evil in this world. Jesus got angry in the temple. There are right things to be passionately angry about. Injustice should make us angry. Abuse should make us angry. Murder, abortion, trafficking, and a whole list of other things. But if belief takes time, we have to be really careful about directing that anger towards people and canceling them and acting like there is no room for redemption. Look, Jesus came to cancel sin, not people. And if the primary refrain we get throughout the Bible is that he is compassionate and gracious, slow to get angry, and abounding in steadfast love, that should be in our hearts as well. Jesus came to destroy the works of the devil, to overturn injustice, to cancel addiction and fear and emptiness. He came for people, for all people. So be angry about injustice. Debate positions, lobby for what is right. Use your mind, think, reason, all of those things, but don't cancel people. Remember from a few weeks ago, we said it this way. If we're following Jesus, we're called to be recruiters, not prosecutors and judges. We're gonna leave the judging and the prosecuting up to God. He can handle that part. He actually says that's for him. That's for Jesus alone to do. What we're doing is we're trying to recruit people to the love and the grace of Jesus. Think about Paul, the Apostle Paul, who wrote so much of the New Testament for us, and we're indebted to for being able to be here and be Christians today, followers of Jesus, because Paul is the one who took this missionary gospel message around the world about this grace and truth of Jesus, right? Do you know that Paul should have been canceled? By all methods and standards we have today, Paul should have been canceled. He was the greatest threat to Christianity in the first century. He was there when the first Christian martyr, Stephen, was killed. They laid the robes at Saul's feet because he initiated the execution of a follower of Jesus. He hated Christians and he hated Jesus. And God said, no, we're gonna turn this one around. I've got a redemption story for you, one of the greatest redemption stories we've had in the history of Christianity. He turns him from being a persecutor of Christians to being the greatest missionary Christianity has ever seen, planting churches around the world. God turned that one around. And if you find yourself in the place where maybe you have done something in your life or you've hidden something or there's some secret part of your life that you think is, if that was known, that's probably worthy of me being canceled, come to Jesus. So I implore you to do. Come to Jesus. He was canceled so that you can be forgiven and healed. Belief takes time. So don't cancel people. But then realize the third thing, that if you do believe in Jesus, not everyone will get it or be supportive. The third thing we see about the nature of belief is that not everybody is going to be down with you. Not everybody is going to like it. Not everybody is going to agree with you. Jesus healed this guy in John 5, and I'm not sure that he got it. It seemed like he kind of ratted Jesus out, right? The Pharisees wanted to kill Jesus. Many other people ranged from confusion about what Jesus was doing to being angry at him to apathy. Get this, after Jesus died and resurrected, he's getting ready to ascend back up into heaven. At that moment, outside of Jerusalem, when he met with his followers after 3.5 years and his death and resurrection, guess how many followers he had when he was going back to heaven? 120 people. Now, there's probably others that were scattered throughout Jerusalem, like that Samaritan woman in her town that wasn't there. But if you've got 120 people that are following you and you're Jesus, you're about to go back into heaven, that means there are thousands of people that are opposed to you. Thousands of people that are apathetic. Thousands of people that don't give a lick and don't care. Thousands of people that are aggressively against you because they tried to get you killed. And when you come to believe in Jesus and you let him truly have control of your life, you will experience the same thing. Many people will be happy for you, but they're never going to want in on it. Others will think you've lost it. Some of them will tell you that you've lost it. And some people may be just downright aggressive against you. Remember, when I was a pastor in Ohio at a university church, Miami University of Ohio, we often would have students that during their college years would come to believe in Jesus and give their life to him. And for a number of those students, it was very challenging because they experienced this very thing. I remember one young couple that came to believe in Jesus and they wanted to get married, and her parents said, "We do not support you. We will not pay for your wedding. We won't come to your wedding. I can't believe that you are marrying a Christian." Other parents would say to their students, "We are so disappointed in you. We paid all of this money for you to go to Miami University, and you are now going to waste your life by becoming a Christian and following God. What are you thinking? We're ashamed of you." Maybe you've experienced some of this. From uncomfortable situations, maybe to just flat out anger. I think some of you you've lost friendships or you've lost family members over your faith in Jesus. Now, here's what you have to know. This is usually a sign that you are doing something right. Not that you ask for it, not that you try to be persecuted, not that you want people to misunderstand you, and not that you want people to be angry with you, right? Remember, we're patient, we're gracious, we're loving. Don't be a Christian jerk. Don't invite it into your life. But sometimes finding Jesus means people don't get it. The woman at the well, she left her water jars at the well and probably the man she was living with. The disciples left their fishing business and probably some of their friends. Nicodemus, if he did come to believe, would have to go against his entire religious order and everything he had built his life on. But it was worth it because Jesus is worth it. There was a missionary that went down to Ecuador to share Jesus with some Ecuadorians, and those very people that he went to share with killed him. He was martyred. You maybe know him as Jim Elliot. And Jim Elliot once said this: "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep. Status, I'm enough, praise from people, all the relationships in my life. Who gives what he cannot keep, those things, to gain what he cannot lose, eternal life and hope and fulfillment in Jesus." Look, you can't please everybody all the time. And sometimes there are sacrifices. And sometimes those people who don't like you or you disappoint, they're a sign that you're doing something right. So remember, lastly, the fourth thing about the nature of this belief in Jesus is that Jesus is for you. Remember that Jesus is for you. Yes, Jesus came for all people. This is why he speaks to an immoral woman, and then he speaks to a religious insider, he speaks to a lame man, he speaks to a blue-collar worker, he speaks to the wealthy, like every kind of person. But never forget that Jesus came for you. Like, he knows your name, he created you, and he loves you. And he wants to bring you to belief in him. There's two ways I think that he does this. When we talk about Jesus coming and Jesus, we can maybe say Jesus pursuing you to produce belief in you. I think he does this in at least two ways, and we see it in this story. The first way Jesus is going to do this is by challenging you. That's verse 14, right? When Jesus finds this man in the temple later on, Jesus makes it a point to seek him out. He finds him because Jesus wasn't done with him yet. He brought the grace, and now he comes to the man and he says to him very clearly, stop sinning. Stop going your way. Stop living life the way that you think is best, and believe in me and follow me and yield your life to me. Jesus challenges this man, and he's gonna challenge you too. He does the same thing to the Pharisees. They have an interaction, Jesus and the Pharisees, a little bit later on after this story. In verse 36, notice the outcome of this. Notice how strong Jesus speaks to the religious leaders. Verse 36, he says, I have a testimony weightier than that of John. He's talking about John the Baptist. He says, for the works that the Father has given me to finish, the very works that I'm doing, healing people, testify that the Father has sent me. Look, you should see, I'm working miracles. Who else of you have seen that has worked miracles? I'm from God, believe in me. And the Father who sent me has himself testified concerning me. Look at this, you have never heard his voice or seen his form, and his word does not dwell in you, for you don't believe the one he sent. You study the scriptures diligently because you think that in them you have eternal life. They're the very scriptures that testify about me, but you refuse to come to me to have life. And then verse 42, I know you. I know that you do not have the love of God in your hearts. Yikes. The religious leaders of the day, and Jesus just lays it all out there for them. I've always told you this, Jesus is always gonna be straight up with you. Jesus will be honest with you, he will be truthful with you. He's gonna say, don't go that way, that's wrong. Why are you living that way? He'll call us out, he'll challenge us, he'll press on our hearts. Like if when you're reading the Bible, or you're here and you're hearing messages, or you're in a community group or a Bible study, and you always feel comfortable, and you're always like, yeah, that's good. I don't know if you're really reading the Bible. Like, I don't know if you're really hearing from Jesus. We're human beings. So if the creator of the universe who has spoken these words to us never is pressing on your heart and cutting you a little bit and saying, that's off. You've got some bigotry in your heart there. You've got some prejudice in your heart there. You're not loving that person. You're not as patient as you should be. And I want to help you with that. If we're never feeling pressed a little bit, if we're never feeling challenged, we're probably not really following Jesus after all, right? He's gonna challenge us. He's going to press us. He will challenge you. That's Jesus, he is the truth. But you know the number one thing that he's gonna press us with, the number one truth that he wants to impress upon your heart, it's this, that he is full of grace and love to you, that he gives you life. That's verse 24. Very truly, I tell you, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and will not be judged, but is crossed over from death to life. This is grace. This is being accepted by your creator through Jesus. This is your hope and your life. Jesus has to press against you to get you to see that you're not enough so that you will come to believe that he is enough and give your entire life to him and let him shape everything about you. That's what he's trying to do in you. Look, when you believe this, meaning you accept the challenges that Jesus brings into your life, you accept his truth and you let him shape your life, then you realize that this is grace and love and compassion. All the deepest things that you need in your life are found by yielding yourself to Jesus. And when you are filled with that, when you're filled with him, it gives you the strength that you need to be patient with others and not cancel them, because belief takes time. It took time for you. Growth and change takes time in your life. And you know, it takes time in other people's lives as well. It gives you the strength to believe when others don't get it or they put pressure on you, because you know that Jesus gets you and he is for you. And in the end, that's all that matters. He walks with you today and he gives you eternal life forever. And I hope you also know one other thing on this journey of believing in Jesus, that you have a church family here who is with you and for you, who is ready to give you grace and space, who says, let's lock arms and do this journey together, believing in Jesus, sharing our doubts, our fears, our struggles, being honest with who we are and where we're at, and looking to Jesus together. Jesus who came for all of us. Would you pray with me?